Hey, we're doing faces today, or at least a face. Um, and we'll see how long I can hold it together. Talking to the camera is kind of a uncomfortable experience. Um, but today we're doing talking about breaking into the industry and talk about how I did it and maybe different strategies for how you could do it. And I have a few questions from people that got sent to me online. And I'll try to answer those tonight. And hopefully we'll keep this kind of short. Keep it under an hour for sure. Hey everybody. Hey Austin. Hey Kelly. Drudak. How's it going? All right. Well, I thought maybe first I would talk really briefly about how I got into the industry and got my first job, and then I would go into answering questions. So I started off. My first published work was a book called Petrograd from Oni Press. They just did a 10-year anniversary re-release last year, and I got that job by taking my portfolio to a comic convention. It was the Stumptown Comics Fest in Portland, Oregon, and I showed my portfolio to James Lucas Jones, and he just so happened to have the script for Petrograd sitting on his desk that Phil Gillette had pitched him, and they liked it, and they were looking for an artist, and they thought I would be a good fit based on my portfolio. And then I got the job, got the contract, and spent 2.5 years working on that, nights and weekends. And then it came out to much fanfare. Not really. It did okay. It did good. Oh, Kelly says to show the pic. Oh, I can't reach it. I can't reach it, Kelly. I'm sorry. I have my desk set up kind of funny. I actually have a picture of me signing up at the Stumptown Comics Fest for the portfolio review. So it's like, it was just kind of an amazing picture. Somebody was taking pictures at the convention, just random pictures, and they happened to catch me like a half hour before like my dream of becoming a comic book artist came true, which is very wonderful. I like having, I printed it out. I have it hanging over my desk, and yeah, it's wild that somebody captured that moment. So anyway, the portfolio I presented was had basically two things in it. It had a script from Dark Horse Comics, had a script on their website for years. There was a Ghost script for a character called Ghost, and it was like a 6-page story. And if you look online for the Dark Horse Comics sample script Ghost, you'll find a ton of people have done versions of it. And it's pretty fun to actually see what they did and how they did it. Everyone based on the same script. So I had that, which I think was okay. Like, those pages were okay. They were, I think they were probably professional quality, but not like good professional quality. And then the second thing I had in my portfolio was a story that I was writing at the time that was, I was sort of making it up as I was going along, but it was basically the story about a bunch of people who lived in an apartment building, and their trials and tribulations just before the zombie apocalypse hit. And I never had a real good plan for it or anything, but I had 12 pages of stuff that I thought I still think is like pretty good pages of just like it was mostly just character stuff, like people sitting in rooms talking and being dramatic and stuff. Um, hey, Math Raptor. Hey, Edie. Yeah, we're doing faces today. Yeah, it would be fun to do like a compilation of that ghost script, Kelly, of all the different people who've done that. I think people would get a kick out of that. Um, so those were the two things. Well, but what was interesting, I think, about my portfolio was that the ghost stuff was basically superhero stuff, and I've never been a giant superhero guy. Um, and the more character driven stuff was something that I was like really actually excited about and was doing. And every time I showed that portfolio to anybody, they would flip through the ghost stuff and sort of be like, "Oh, this is nice. This is looking good. Whatever, whatever." And then they would get to the stuff that I actually wanted to draw, and their demeanor would change instantly, and they'd be like, "Oh, this is interesting. I like this. This is fascinating." You know what I mean? The thing that the people reacted to was the same thing that I was passionate about, which is something that like I usually tell people in when they're trying to put together their portfolio is that you should like fill it with artwork that makes you excited and not fill it with things that you think other people want to see, because they can tell the difference. Like everyone can tell the difference. There's just like a lot more energy and passion in the stuff that you like as opposed to the stuff that you think other people will like. Hey, Mark, thanks for joining us. So the way I got into comics is very weird, I think. I don't know if I know another cartoonist who got into comics from like directly from a portfolio review. I think almost everybody like portfolio reviews are very useful in having somebody sort of look at your work and tell you some of the things that you're probably missing in your own work, stuff that you can't see. That if you show it to a professional, they can usually see it pretty easily. They can't always express it to you very clearly and concisely. I think that's my weakness when I review other people's portfolios, is I don't always know what to tell people about it. I can see it, but I don't always have the vocabulary to sort of describe it to other people. Yeah, so I got that Petrograd book. Took me 2.5 years. I had a advance of a few $1,000, and like I did the math on it at one point, and yeah, I've made it's made royalties since then, but at the time, like when it came out, I basically had made like $1.25 an hour or something like that. So monetarily, that first book wasn't worth it for me, but having completed a 250-page graphic novel that got me recognized, like I got a Russ Manning Promising Newcomer Award for that book. I think the value of having done that book is like immeasurable. You can count the dollars, but the real benefit of it was that it allowed me to get other work. And based on that, like I met when I was almost done with Petrograd, I met Mike Mignola at a comic convention, and I showed him my Petrograd pages, and he seemed to really like them. And he gave me his card and told me to keep in touch. And I did. I like every 6 months or 9 months, I would send him an email that would be like, I'm getting close to the end of making Petrograd, and I'll be available maybe for this sort of project if you're interested. And just kept in touch with him. And then when Guy Davis left BPRD, they called me and offered me that job. And that's basically what after that, I feel like it's hard to say that that was sort of got like once I got that job, I was set because I really wasn't. I only had that job for maybe a year and a half or 2 years before they sort of stopped having me draw BPRD. Um, did have me draw a witch finder after that, but it sort of petered out, and it really. I think the reason why I was able to keep getting work on other projects was basically by building relationships with my peers and building relationships with editors, and and just trying really, really hard to be professional and stuff. It's not always easy, at least the professional part, but the having relationships with your peers is actually really easy and really fun, and that's a really fulfilling part of working in the industry, is actually having um, peers that you admire and you're able to work with them. That stuff is great. Feel free to pop any questions into the chat. I'm going to start going through the questions I got online. The first question on Twitter by D. Emerson Eddy is, should I use a crowbar or a lockpick to break into comics? And I would start with the lockpick and then move to the crowbar afterwards. And then Austin, I'll show you some commissions at the end. I actually did not make any progress on the Erica Slaughter piece. As soon as I got off the live stream last week, my wife and I discovered a leak in our ceiling from a water pipe, and sort of that ended up taking up my whole weekend. It's still not settled, but we're getting there. And then over on Mastodon, Art Laszlo asks, what path do you see for someone who's not interested in working for a publisher, either as an artist or a writer? That's a good question, I think, because comics definitely is a space where you can self-publish, and very few people look down on that, as opposed to, say, a lot of novels. I think people look at self-published novels as being sort of shifty or not as great as a published novel. So I think if I were going to make comics and I was going to do it without a publisher, I think what I would do is I would make the comic I want to make, and I don't think that I would kickstart it as my first project. I think that I would actually just save up my own money and do a print on demand sort of a thing, and print it. If you're going to do a couple, like if you're going to do under 100 copies, you can do print on demand, and it's really pretty affordable for like if you're printing something like a floppy style comic, 22 pages, you could do that for less than $2 a piece, maybe. It's been a while since I've checked prices, but you can do it for pretty affordable. And then I would go to first I'd probably go to my local comic shops and see if they would sell them on commission, which is a pretty standard thing for a lot of comic shops. And then I would start doing conventions and selling them there. And I would probably take the approach that the first couple years of that would be done at a financial loss, I think. Like, it's just really hard to make money by selling small numbers of comics, and but I think that would be the way to go to sort of slowly grow it. And ED asks, what job challenged you the most, while at the same time, if you could go back in time, would you still take the job? I would absolutely still take the job. Um, when I took the job of BPRD, I did a lot of math to figure out if I could afford to do it for a living. And I mostly did it using magical logic and hopeful, like wishful thinking. And it's sort of almost worked out for me financially. I mean, I guess another way to put that is that it did not work out for me financially, and we had to make a lot of sort of life changes to be able to continue making comics. One of the things that we did was we had to sell our house in San Diego and move to Oregon, um, and go someplace where it was much cheaper to live. You know, my mortgage in San Diego was um, more than double what we're paying now for our mortgage. So we had to do stuff like that to cut, take down our expenditures every month. Um, and the most challenging job, I think, was probably my working on BPRD, because my editor at the time uh, was very demanding of me. And like I would turn in the layouts for a book, and a few hours later or the next day I would get the notes back, and I would basically have to like go lay down. Like the notes were so um, brutal and extensive, and it was a hard way to work, and I have very mixed feelings about it, because I feel like I learned a lot from those notes, but I also learned a lot of the wrong stuff from those notes. And as soon as I stopped working with that particular editor and started working with Daniel Shaban, I feel like my work got instantly much better. So that was the hardest part, was just working on a work for hire project that was very with a very demanding editorial. I can't believe that wasn't a moneymaker, Kelly. One of these days, I would love to see that. The kind of notes so Kelly asks, does Dan give you a lot of notes or just different kinds of notes? And he doesn't give me a lot of notes. The real, like, sort of big, important stuff, I've often sort of got him on the phone, and we've hashed it out and talked about it, and then I go off and do my thing. I definitely get a ton of copy editing notes, because my copy editing skills are basically zero. They're really bad. So I rely on them a lot for that. And Chuck, who's the assistant editor, does a lot of that. He's amazing. Yeah. Yeah, Mark says that Daniel, his notes are very thoughtful when he gives them, and I would agree with that. And that's actually a lot of how I try to be when we've had other artists work on like Harrow County and stuff. When I've had things like notes, I've always tried to be very judicious and be like, I only want to give notes if something is actually a problem and if I know the solution. And if something's a problem and I don't know the solution, I sort of approach it with being very clear that I don't know what to do. You know what I mean? Because I think there's a lot of people who don't know what to do but pretend like they do, and that can cause more problems. Um, and yeah, Kelly here is right. Dan is great about giving people space to be creative. He's direct, but he believes in the people he works with. I think that's probably a good read on his editing style. All right, let's check some of the questions I had on Instagram. Oh, wait, before we go on, ED Bass asks, after BPRD, what kind of artistic issues and artistic growth helped you on other projects? Artistic issues and artistic growth helped you. I think the thing that, and this is the thing that I still struggle with, is trying to trust myself to do sort of idiosyncratic things with my storytelling. Um, and I think that's been like a slow growth on my part that has uh, been good for me in general. Just sort of because style comes down to the idiosyncrasies of like how you're going to present, how you arrange a panel, how you arrange panels on a page, um, how you make marks, like all that stuff sort of adds up. And it's taken me a long time to really sort of trust myself to do the thing that I feel like I want to do, that I feel like would look good and feel good to do. Because when I do the things that feel right to me, that it almost always is the right thing. The thing, it's like I was saying earlier, what if I'm designing pages to appeal to somebody else, they're going to always feel compromised. But if I make the page that I want to make, the page that I want to see, um, it's going to resonate better with the reader. So I mean, that's the big lesson that I'm still sort of perpetually trying to teach myself. um Rudak says, so would you say working for a page rate is unsustainable without royalties and other income? And that ties into some other questions I had on Instagram, where this person asks, how much does an artist get paid per page? And that's like a wide open question. You can definitely make a living off of page rate. Basically, I order my finances around my page rate, because royalties are always a question mark. Like, I do get royalties regularly, mostly on Harrow County, um, but but I never know what it's going to be. I can't actually plan anything around that income, because it's always it varies widely. And my income varies from year to year, almost, you know I hate to say like specific numbers on the internet, because it's very easy for people to sort of intentionally misinterpret them and go off and talk about them later. But my income can vary by tens of thousands of dollars every year, and it makes it hard to plan. But I always just sort of try to plan for the smallest income. And thankfully, I have a partner who is very good with Excel, and they do a lot of helpful work on that. But a page rate can vary anywhere between. I mean, there's companies out there that will pay you like $10 a page, and I would probably call those companies like uh, immoral, disreputable. Um, I think the least that you should get for a full page of comics that's going to be published professionally, um, like the very least is like $150, and that would just be probably for black and white. Um, and like I can't even imagine what Jim Lee gets for a page. Like, he must get you know, more than $1,000 per page, maybe $2,000 per page. And a lot of the top name guys are like that. Like if you're very well known for doing some superhero thing, like a Frank Miller page or a Jim Lee page or a John Romita Jr. page, like those guys are going to get paid a lot. So it is possible to make a living just off of a page rate, but you have to be able to work fast and work good, and those are two things that are hard to do at the same time. In fact, my work, I think, is getting better as I go along, but I'm also getting slower as I go along. So there's a lot of things to balance on that. Yes. What else are we asking? Living with 10 other cartoonists sounds like a nightmare. C. Adams Art asks, do you ever feel pressured to work digitally as a traditional artist? Is time working traditionally a huge issue for you? I don't ever feel pressured to work digitally. I actually do partially work digitally. I do all my pencils digitally. But no, if anything, I feel pressured to keep doing watercolor art. There was a job I did for a Deadpool comic a couple years ago, and the editor, was like, "We want you to do this 10-page story." Cullen Bunn wrote it, and they're like, "We want you to do it." And I'm like, "Well, do you want me to? Is this just for line art, or do you want the watercolor thing?" And there was a pause, and they were like, "We want you to do the watercolor thing." So I was like, that was the first time I realized that I was that guy now. I'm the watercolor guy from now on. And I have plans to do stuff that is not watercolor. And in fact, I was working on that Instagram comic, The Void Without, and I was doing that entirely digitally. I'm sort of weighing how I'm going to approach that when I come back to it. I'm thinking I might actually move to working traditionally on paper for that, but we'll have to see. We'll have to see. Hey, Morgan, you did finally make it. Morgan says they do their comics on Webtoon and Tapas, which makes no money. I have heard really bad stuff recently about Webtoons and Tapas and how they pay, and it seems like a great platform for publishing comics if you just want to put them out there and don't need to do it for money, and as a way to sort of learn and grow an audience and all that sort of stuff. But yeah, no, I've heard that it is not a place to make money. Yeah, ED, I think 150 a page minimum is like, I think that's where you can make a living doing it if you live someplace sort of affordable. Yeah, but I mean, like I said about working on Petrograd, there's reasons that it is rational to take a job for less money for a non-living wage. But you have to just be clear that what you're doing when you're doing it. Like if you're doing it for no money, or if you're doing it for so little money that you're not going to make a living wage, then you need to understand that and allot your time accordingly and your deadlines accordingly. Selling the original artwork helps too. That definitely helps. Selling original art, especially doing my watercolor pages. My watercolor pages are typically between like $300 and $1,200 for the original art, and so selling those actually helps a lot. How far ahead do you work when doing a monthly book? From Rudag, Drudag, Rudag. So it varies a lot. At the beginning of a mini series, I'm usually way further ahead, and then by the end, I'm like I'm finishing the files just in time to send them to the printer. So, for example, my book, the Lonesome Hunters mini series, the next story arc, comes out at the end of May, and I finished the first issue, I think 2.5 months ago. So that would make it, let's see here, February, March, April, May, essentially June, and then 2.5 more months. So I'm working 6.5 months ahead. But by the time the last issue comes out, I'm going to be closer to like 1 or 2 months ahead, I think. I mean, hopefully I'll be doing better than that, but the reality is that's how it sort of tends to pan out. Morgan asks, do you market, advertise your comic, or do your publishers take care of that? It is a combo. Publishers try to take care of that. But the unfortunate reality, especially with comic shops, is that the comic shops get a lot of advertising stuff. They get a lot of, emails with press releases in them and stuff like that. And it's impossible for them to sort of sort through it, at least like go through all of it and like read about it and, study all that stuff. But if I do marketing for it, they're much more likely to sort of pay attention to it. So for the Lonesome Hunters, I've been doing postcards, and I've been doing some signed book plates and things that are specifically geared towards marketing to the retailers. Because the other thing about the comic book market is that lots of times they buy the comics from the publisher, and those, in a typical bookstore scenario, a bookstore who will get some books from the publisher. They'll sell a few of them. They won't sell a few of them, and they just send the ones they don't sell back to the publisher. But the comic book industry, the direct market, is set up a little bit differently, where the retailers are like, they're not returnable. So they buy the comics, and then the retailers own those comic books until they sell them. So as a result, like, the person who's buying my comics, like where the money actually makes it to me, is from selling it to the shops rather than selling it to the end reader, which is a very strange dynamic. So part of the marketing that I try to do is to really focus on communicating to a retailer what the comic is and how they can sell it, like what the story pitch is that they can give to their customers, and so that they can find the customers who like that sort of thing and sell them my book. So yeah, it's a combo between me and the publisher. Hey, Pippy Pop, thanks for coming by. Hello, hello, hello. Mark asks, I'm curious how things like the book plates you did recently work with your relationship with comic book stores. I'm curious about that too. I think that comic book retailers probably, so like everything about making comic books is hard. Writing a comic book is really hard. Drawing a comic book is really friggin' hard. Um, Getting the files set up to send it to the printer is hard. Um, Nowadays, working out the shipping to get the books shipped where they all need to go on time is like impossible. Um, but out of everybody, I swear that I think that retailers have the hardest job. They have not the biggest margins, and they they are they're basically on the front lines. You know what I mean? They're out there like actually slinging books in a way that I don't have to do. So with stuff like the book plate, um, the goal with that is to make it easier for a retailer to sell my books. Um, and so it sort of serves two purposes. One, it gives the retailer um, something that they can help them sell the book. You know, I mean, if you're like, here's this Lonesome Hunters book, and here's a Lonesome Hunters that is signed. Now it's like, oh, maybe I'm more interested in buying that book now because it has this book plate in it. And the other thing is to just sort of build a relationship with the retailers and let them know that sort of I'm thinking about them and I love them, and hopefully they'll think about me and love me back. So I don't know how well the book plates are working. I do sort of plan at this point to do book plates like that for every volume of the Lonesome Hunters for as long as it's going. Uh, yeah, so yeah, I don't know if that answers your question specifically enough, but I don't know, the shops that have gotten it, I think feel good about it, and I feel good about giving it to them, and so and it's fun. Kelly says you're great at marketing your comics. I hope so. I'm trying. It is. I always feel like I'm about a month behind where I need to be with marketing. Like um, everything. It's like the day that the comic comes out, I needed to have been doing marketing stuff for a month leading up to that, um, or more. So I always feel like I'm like behind and doing catch up. Morgan says making comics is really hard, but I constantly see non-artists and writers say they can make better ones. Shake my head. That is a weird thing, and it is like uh, so common. I don't know. I don't know where it comes from. I think. I think the thing about a comic book is that everything about it is there. Maybe you don't necessarily know how, um, like the technical stuff about how a comic is colored or whatever. But if you look especially at like a black and white comic, everyone knows how to make lines on paper. Everyone can sort of see that there's lines on paper with a comic book. It's like laid out bare, and it seems like it's understandable. And I think that making a comic book is actually easy, even though not to contradict myself too much, but making a comic book is easy. Making a good comic book is extremely hard. So I think when people see a comic, they're like, "Oh, that's easy." But what they're seeing is like how it's made, not how to make a good one. Um, yeah, I think that's real common with a lot of that sort of stuff. Juan, how you doing, man? Pippy Pop asks if I'll ever get back to the Instagram story I had going over COVID, and yeah, I'm hoping to. I'm hoping that that'll be my next project after the Lonesome Hunters wraps up. But also, I'm hoping the Lonesome Hunters won't wrap up for another couple years. So, unfortunately, it's kind of on hold for the foreseeable future. Um, if I get better at sort of multitasking writing, I might be able to bring it back. But Yeah, we'll see. And basically, I got the story to a point. I was doing it improvisationally, basically just making up the next panel and then the next panel and the next panel. It was sort of an idea in my head of where I was going. And then towards the end, I had gotten to a point where I started to need to actually plan the middle of it. And I've made some progress on that plan, but it's been slow going. And most of my writing energy has been going into the Lonesome Hunters because that's what's on my plate. Kelly asks, are your work days longer, shorter, the same in comics as when you worked in video games? Um, that's difficult to sort of quantify. Video games would be like 6 months of crunch time doing like 12-hour work days. But it would be like that once, every 2 years or something. Um, Comics for me tend to be about 10-hour work days. Um, kind of consistently. And I did spend like the first couple years of my professional comics career working basically 7 days a week. And I would take a day off basically when I hit a burnout point, um, which is not a good way to do it. I wouldn't suggest it. Um, right now, I'm sort of working basically 5.5 days a week, trying really hard to get my weekends back. But yeah, so I think I probably work more uh, as a as a cartoonist, but I work at home, uh, and my partner works at home, and my pets are all at home, and so it doesn't feel quite as intense as if I was going to the office and working those same hours. What else we got? How do you divide your time between writing and illustrating? Are you doing both every day? My goal is to do both every day. What I try to do, and I very rarely actually hit this, but I try to write for a half hour every morning. And if I'm feeling good, I'll, stretch it out to an hour. Um, but I find that if I do that every single day, it's actually kind of remarkable how much you can get done in a half hour of focused work. So, and if you do it a half hour every day, at the end of the week or at the end of the month, I've made a lot of progress. So, um, I try to do it every day. I usually don't make it. I'll go in sort of fits and starts where I'll write every morning for a week or two, and then it'll sort of something will come up, and I'll feel like I don't have time to do that extra half hour. But I usually do have that time. I just feel stressed and don't do it. Oh, and then I should add that with the Lonesome Hunters, the way I've been doing it is even with my writing a half hour every day, I usually don't have the whole next story arc written by the time it's time, like by the time I finish. So by the time I finish um, the first story arc, I did not have the second story arc done, but I did have it like fully outlined. So then I had to go in and do the writing part, which is kind of the easiest part for me. Like the outlining is really where all the work is for me. Morgan, I've seen all your shorts and they're really fun. But yeah, I can imagine those are taking a lot of time and energy. I mean, the shorts and like Instagram reels and stuff are so time consuming to do. I think that's why so many artists like complain about them, is because the algorithm wants you to do them, but they take forever. So all usernames taken by now on Instagram asks, after the comic is done, do you get a percentage of sales? Not from DC Marvel, obviously. And it depends on the contract. I have done work for hire where I don't get any royalties. Um, uh, all my creator owned stuff, I do get royalties from. Um, well, I contractually will get royalties after the advance is recouped by the publisher. So the way it works is the publisher, and the way an advance works is the publisher gives you a certain amount of money, usually right up front, um, for a book. Or usually it has like, there's milestones you have to hit. Like they'll give you some money before you start. They'll give you money when you've reached a certain milestone. They'll give you another bunch of money when you've finished, etc. Um, and then they start selling the books. And let's say they gave you an advance of $100. They'll sell the books until the publisher has made $100 profit off of those books, and then all the profit after that gets split by whatever percentage is agreed on. I actually do get, I don't know if they call it a royalty from Marvel and DC, but the stuff I've done for Marvel, I do get royalty statements on that. It's one of those things where I have occasionally gotten a check for like $1.95. But they do, Marvel and DC do both have profit sharing stuff. All usernames taken by now also asks, what are the challenges of working on an ongoing title? And man, I think the big challenges are, one, burnout. Ongoing titles are an incredible amount of work. It's sort of my preferred kind of project to work on. Like I love, like Harrow County was just about the perfect size project for me. 3.5 years on one thing. And I know a lot of artists shiver at the thought of working on a single project for that long, um, but that's my favorite. I love like really immersing myself in a project like that. But at the same time, it is challenging to work on the same thing every day, day after day after day, for year on end. So burnout is a real challenge. And there was one other thing that I had in my mind and is gone now. Challenges of working on an ongoing title. When yeah, and I guess this is related to burnout too, but I think there's a thing when you're working on a project. When you're working on a creative project, almost always there's a point in it where you sort of wonder if it's worth it. There's a point where you're like, no one, where you've sort of convinced yourself that no one else in the world is going to want to see this piece of artwork, and it's just kind of a waste of your time, and it would be way easier if you just quit and went and did something else. um, and that urge can be very strong on a project that goes on for years, and it comes up again and again and again, and it's really important for me to remind myself that uh, the people reading the book aren't working on the book day after day, years on end. They're actually just sitting down one afternoon and reading the book and having a pleasant experience. So like the it's just, I don't know, it's just important to remember that it is worthwhile, but the experience that I'm getting from creating the book is much different than the experience of reading the book. I don't know if that makes any sense now that I'm saying it out loud, but it's sort of like my vibe about how it goes. Juan says that the good thing about ongoings is you have all the characters and settings ready in your mind, and you can almost jump right into drawing the comic. And that is so true. Nothing like slows down my production like having to design a character, even if it's just like a one-off character that I've never drawn before. As soon as they pop up, I have to like stop what I'm doing and figure it out. And if this like if the characters and the setting are repeating regularly, you can sort of really get into a vibe of how to draw them and get it really fast. Pippy Pop asks if I'm going to have any Lonesome merch coming out. Um, I don't have plans for anything. I would like to, but I don't have any plans for it. Yeah. uh, Rudak asks, do you write your own contracts? How do you learn to do it, if so? I do not. Um, with publishers that I work with regularly, it's often basically the same contract over and over and over. And I've sat down with a lawyer and gone over those contracts very thoroughly early on in my career. And so when it's just the same contract over and over and over with like slightly different dollar amounts or whatever, um, I do those myself. When I need when the contract is larger with a publisher or a new publisher, I'll hire a lawyer to look over it with me um, and figure out what we need to change and tweak. Uh, the publishers almost always write the contracts, and then I ask them to change them a little bit. Um, yeah, but I don't write them. And anytime you're going to sign a contract, the smart thing to do is always hire a lawyer, even though it is sometimes painfully expensive to get it done. Mark Tweedle asks, I think the level of immersion shows in Harrow County, especially in the character acting. Thank you. I really care a lot about my character acting, and yeah, getting to know a character makes it way easier to know how to draw, like how they're going to react to different events. And yeah, I feel like spending so long with those characters, you really turned into them and found nuances in their acting you might not have come to if you'd spent a long time away. I think that's true. I think that there's a lot of nuances to the acting that I get into. There's also a lot of shorthand that I end up using. It's funny. I feel like there's character shorthand, and then there's like Tyler shorthand, and they kind of overlap in a lot of ways. Like, I can't think of a really good example of this, but there's ways I draw characters and their reactions and acting, and sometimes they're driven specifically by the character, and other times they're driven by like me sort of being like, how would I react to this thing? Um, so I don't know. That's funny. Like I think that's part that ends up reading a lot as sort of my personal style. Um, so I don't mind it too much. Juan says the good thing about ongoings is that you have all the characters. Oh, yep, 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 yep. ED Bass says after BPRD, what factors, Petrograd and BPRD included, would bring you new jobs early on? Did you have to scramble, or did it get easier? It did get easier. One of the things that I did, I should do more of this. Actually, I did this a lot early on, where when I finished a project, I would, give it a couple weeks or whatever, and then I would write an editor an email and be like, "That job wrapped up. I had a great time. I really liked doing it. Was there anything in the way we worked together that you think I could have done better? And basically tried to do a post-mortem with them. And I don't think I ever got any real like helpful feedback from that, but I think that it made the editors feel really good about working with me because it's just like um, uh, customer service with them. If the editor was my customer, I'm trying to make sure that I'm making them happy. And I think that I think one of the biggest things you can do in comics, if you want to have a career in comics, is to make friends with your peers, um, not based on their like success or whatever, but just the people who are um, with you that you see at the conventions every day. Every time you go to a convention, like there's people that you see again and again, um, and like make real friends. And get to know them and create sort of that support group. And then the people that you work with, I think it's important to just really make an effort to be the easiest person to work with that you possibly can be, while not, if there's a problem, address it directly and, as forthright as you can, but don't be the person who makes problems. Yeah. So I have rarely had to scramble to get work, fortunately. Knock on wood, Jesus Christ. Like, um, I'm almost always have like my next project lined up more than 6 months um, before I need to start on it. Um, and that's another advantage of working on projects that are very long is that I worked on Harrow County for 3.5 years, which meant I didn't have to look for a new job for 3.5 years. Um, yeah. So yeah, it's been pretty rare that I've had to scramble. And when I have had to scramble, because I try really hard to take care of the people that I've worked with, it makes it way easier to send an email and be like, "Hey, I'm scrambling right now. Do you have anything?" Um, yeah, yeah. Juan, changing series is extra mind work that a lot of times sucks. It's like, yeah, starting a new project is really hard. Um, like being when I remember when I did Lonesome, or I did Harrow County, and it wrapped up, and I was at a convention. I think it was in Chicago, and I was with Cullen, and this was like a week after I had turned in the last page or something, or a week before I turned it in. Like I was about to turn in the final pages, and I remember being like, "We got to do Tales of Harrow County and get it started right away because we got to keep doing. We shouldn't cancel Harrow County." And I got kind of freaked out because it was very comfortable, and it's been a pretty successful book. Um, so then moving on to the next thing is always just very sort of nerve-wracking. Kelly asks, "Is there a character story you've always wanted to draw?" I have a Commandy story that I would like to do one of these days. And I'd love to do Swamp Thing or Man Thing. I like. I mean, I talk all the time how much I like drawing trees. So if I could draw a tree man, that would be great. Writing dialogue. So Morgan says my dialogue usually tends to be really stiff because that's how I talk in real life. But I've been trying to fix that. Yeah, writing dialogue is very hard. One of the things that I find that has helped me is I actually do most of my writing on my iPad, and I do a lot of dictation to it. So I'm not typing all the dialogue, I'm actually saying it. And they always say, my editors, every editor I've ever worked with has said that you should say your dialogue out loud, so you hear how it feels, and how it actually sounds to say that stuff. And so when I'm actually dictating to my iPad, I'm like acting it out, and and I'm hand gesturing, and I'm like I'm acting, I'm being a goober sitting in my studio doing that stuff, and it is really helps, especially when you get into it and you're sort of like acting as the characters instead of acting as yourself and saying the dialogue. It's really great. It's really fun, actually. And it's silly, but it's really fun. So Mark says, I'm curious, with your work for hire, like the World of Black Hammer stuff, is that work you sought out, or was that more driven by your relationship with folks at Dark Horse? I think that was probably driven by folks at Dark Horse. Um, I don't know. I don't know actually exactly how that came about, as far as how Jeff Lemire learned about my work. It's very likely that my editor at Dark Horse was throwing out names for artists that they could use, and my name came up. But yeah, I think that was driven by my relationships with my editors. That's a guess, though. I don't know for sure. I mean, it's possible that Lemire saw my stuff and was like, called up Daniel and was like, get Tyler Crook on the phone. But I doubt it. Oh, nice, Bo. I hope you like it. Bo V picked up the Lonesome Hunters trade. Thanks, Edie. I'm really proud of that Black Hammer stuff. I feel like I leveled up pretty good. All right. I think this is the last one on Instagram. How do you get editors to notice you without kidnapping with giant novelty oversized nets? Well, Sean, I'm glad you asked. I don't. So getting the attention of editors and getting the attention of anyone almost always comes down to finishing a project, um, making a comic book from beginning to end, and then showing it to people. There's so much, like I don't know. I've talked earlier in the stream about how hard it is to make comics, and like finishing a comic book is like impossible. It's not possible. No human is capable of finishing a comic book. So if you can do it, it's very impressive to editors. So like I would think, like I think. So I talked earlier about how I would make a comic if I was going to do it without approaching a publisher. But the other part of that is that if I was going to approach a publisher, I might still go through those same steps with the added step of then finding publish or editors who edit books that are similar or in the same vein as the stuff that I want to do. And then I would send them my comic book with a little cover letter that says like, hey, I made this comic, and say something about, I like these books that you've worked on, and list them and say like, I think my style is a good fit, and be like, I hope you would consider me for future projects or something like that. So if I was starting from ground zero, that's how I would do it, I think. But I remember one year at San Diego Comic-Con, there was they used to do the DC talent search, and basically you would take your portfolio. I think they wanted 8 pages of like story art, and you just drop it in a slot on the booth, and they would the next day you go to the booth and they would have a list of names of people they wanted to speak to. And so I did that one year, and they called me back. Like, I came back the next day and there was my name, and I went in and I actually talked to Bob Schreck. And basically, like, everyone that they called back, we just lined up in a hallway at the convention center, and they would sort of bring us in one at a time and talk to us and be like, do basically a little interview and see what we wanted to work on, and see if like there was anything, see if they could work with us if we were, I think they were trying to just see if we were nuts or not. So when I was done with that interview, I was like the last interview of the day, and I'm getting up to leave, and I watched them set up for the next round of portfolio reviews. And it was terrifying because all these editors just sat in a row, and they pulled out the artwork or the samples that people had left, and they just handed them down the line, one to the next. And they usually looked at them for about, I don't know, 8 seconds. If there was something they were a little bit more interested in, it might be 15 seconds they would look at it before passing it on. And then at the end of the line, they just had a trash can. And like, most of these portfolios were just going down the line straight into the trash can. And but I think that it's sort of indicative of how easy it is to know if you like artwork or not. When you're in the comic shop and you're flipping through the books, you can pick it off the shelf and open it up and be like, do I want to look at this for 22 pages? And in a couple seconds, you can usually decide, make a decision. And sometimes, sometimes, like, I know I have like looked at artwork and been like, no, I don't want to read this. Actually, I did that with Lock and Key. When I first saw that, I was like, I don't want to look at this. And then when I finally did sit down to read it, I'm like, this artwork is perfect for the story. It's so good. So what was I talking about? Where did I start with that? Oh, just like, how do you get editors' attention? So the way you do it, the simple formula is do the best work you can possibly do, and then show it to people. And try to show it to people in a, like, if you're gonna show your work to a specific editor, if there's a specific editor you want to speak to, I would not contact them more than like once every 6 months. Probably once a year is more like it. Like, if you submit your portfolio and they're like, your artwork's great, but it's not quite what we're looking for, that's usually code for like, you need to get a little bit better. Then I would work on my stuff and then pitch, send them new stuff in a year. But yeah, just definitely don't like people will, the editor, if you actually directly contact an editor, they will, obviously notice you. And if you are very careful about how much you contact them, and only contact them when you actually have something to show them, then they will notice you and be like, this person is thoughtful and respectful. And like, the last thing you want to do is be noticed and then sort of be noticed as being irritating. So yeah, hopefully that answers that question at all. Oh my gosh, Kelly. Yeah, be safe out there. Don't slip. Mark Tweedale says, when I first saw Guy Davis's artwork, it just didn't click with me. 100 pages later, I was in love with it. Sometimes things don't immediately reveal themselves. And that is 100% true. I think that sometimes what you're, what you're looking for isn't what you need in artwork. So Yeah, Guy Davis is still one of my favorite artists. All right, guys, I think I'm going to wrap it up right there. That was kind of fun. I don't feel too bad about having my face and talking to this camera. My throat's really dry from talking this long, though. So we'll call it quits for the night. Thanks so much for coming. I hope this is helpful to anybody. All that stuff. I hope everybody has a great weekend. thanks, thanks, Kelly. Thanks, Juan. Thanks, Edie. You guys are all so great. Thanks so much for spending the hour with me. I really appreciate it. All right. Have a good one.